Welcome to the Amplified CEO with VC and serial entrepreneur Richard Stroupe. With today's guest, Robin Cowie, founder and CEO of Skillmaker.AI, an AI-powered extended reality platform revolutionizing workforce training. He's also a seasoned producer and director whose work includes time at Electronic Arts and the groundbreaking horror film, The Blair Witch Project.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you so much for coming.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's a gorgeous drive over here. It's so beautiful. A beautiful day here in Wilmington.
Yes, sir. And I know we've exchanged multiple emails and phone calls, but this is the first time we've actually got to see each other in person.
Yes.
So I'm extremely excited, not only just to talk to you about Skillmaker, but to actually have you here on this podcast. So I'm really excited.
Well, I thank you for having the podcast. Your previous guest and I actually had dinner last night.
Scott.
Yeah. Scott. And we were talking about it. And I know it's a little bit early days, but such an important podcast. I'm really glad you're doing this. I think it's really got a lot of value. So
thank you so much. Yeah. So you and Scott are neighbors, yeah?
Yeah, we live, and we had no idea. We actually met at Venture Connect in Raleigh, Durham, and we were talking, and then we basically were like, "Oh, you're here." I'm like, "Wait a second, you're my neighbor." and then the next day we were at the Tiki Bar, so
right.
like up the street from us. So that's where we had dinner again last night. Was back at the Tiki Bar. So
well, it's incredible to have two such outstanding people move to this area for different reasons, but then to find out that you live right next to each other or very close. Yeah, it's very interesting.
There's, look, the Triangle has been an incredible place for quite a while. Wilmington is a very exciting place to be. I just think it's young. You're at the beach. I like business at the beach. It's wonderful. But there's incredible talent here. A lot of people retire here, and so a lot of people have like deep roots here. But yeah, it's a really interesting place, especially, of course, with my film interests. Wilmington's been a film hub for a long time. There's incredible production talent here. So that's exciting for me. But really, one of the main reasons my wife and I mean, after the beach, because both of us love living on the beach, was the Triangle and the talent that is here and in the periphery of the Triangle. It's a very, very cool place. The other choice was Santa Cruz and the Silicon Valley and kind of that area. And I always think that you skate towards where the puck is going, and I feel like there's a lot of really interesting things going here in the Triangle, whereas like Silicon Valley is got its own thing, which is great too. But we love it here.
So what was one of the main reasons you moved to Wilmington? Was it just the ambiance of the lifestyle?
Well, we were living in London when COVID hit. I was doing really interesting, cool things in London, but it was based on physical experiences. That wasn't going to work very well in London, in anywhere. And so my dad had a big challenge going on with the thing that he was doing, which we'll probably get to later. And so I said to Dad that I would come and help him to do what he wanted me to do, but we were going to look for a house. So we drove for 14 months. Airbnb had a deal where if you stayed in an Airbnb for more than a month, they'd give you like $500-600 off of the house, and nobody was traveling. So I was like, well, if nobody's traveling, now that's the time to travel, right? We traveled all over the United States looking for where we wanted to live, and went to just so many incredible places. But it finally kind of came down to the fact that, either Silicon Valley, Santa Cruz, like just a little north of that area was very interesting, or here. And it got us everything we wanted. We wanted the beach. We wanted lots of water. We wanted a young community that was kind of growing, and then we needed to have the technical, resources, and so it all fit here. Plus, we've got a lot of family up and down the East Coast, but it was a very well-researched 14-month exploration to get here. And we're so thrilled with our choice. And we've been here 3 years now. So
okay, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Now, you grew up in South Africa.
Yes.
Tell me about that
journey.
My
dad was an industrial psychologist.
Mm-hmm.
He went to Rhodes University, and he actually started working in gold mines in South Africa, in Johannesburg. And the problem was that people in the mines, the miners, they couldn't read, they couldn't write, they couldn't speak English, and yet they were being given explosives and dangerous equipment, and they were literally measuring the effectiveness of the training by the mortality rate. I mean, it was insane. And my dad, in the 60s, picked up a film camera and started trying to step into the shoes of the people who were being the miners, and show from their point of view what to do. And then he was able to dub that in multiple different languages, no text, so nobody would have to read anything. And this whole idea of point of view learning then inspired what came later for me, which was, essentially the Blair Witch Project, that whole experiential, point of view. But also, I was cheap labor, so I was in the bag changing film, and I was, fixing the cameras and hauling gear for him. So I fell in love with film cameras when I was 14. I grew up near the beach in a place called Durban. My dad was always a technophile. So, I had the very first computers. I had a Commodore 64, and I started programming in Basic A, and went on to all kinds of programming languages. I was obsessed with programming, and also there was just film gear, video gear throughout the house. So I was constantly making things. And I went to, Dead Poets Society. Have you ever seen that movie?
With Robin Williams.
Yeah. I went to that school. It was
that was a beautiful campus. Yeah.
It was, not exactly that school, but I went to an all boys private school, kind of religious based, and very, if you were at that school, you were either going to be a lawyer, a doctor, or a politician. That was it.
Yeah.
But they had computer science classes, and I loved that. And my dad literally came from the vaudeville and theater, so theater and film and that was just in our blood. And that's how I grew up.
So was your school in South Africa or was it United States?
In South Africa. Okay. Yep. We're third generation Scottish heritage.
Okay.
My mother's side of the family was British. Literally was, my grandfather was in, he ran a frigate in World War II. So and then Scottish heritage, but we were sent there because when the British and the Scots were fighting, they would grab the Scots, send them down to South Africa. You go to prison or you go to South Africa to fight the Boers, which were the Afrikaans. And that's how my family came, was to literally fight in South Africa many, many years ago.
Wow.
And South Africa was a very interesting, beautiful, amazing place, but a very difficult time to grow up. I grew up in the middle of apartheid. So similar to Elon Musk in that I got into, gaming very early, got into technology very early. But it was a very hostile environment. There was a lot of, you grew up very quickly. I had friends killed in bomb blasts. I had, if you were against apartheid, it was a tough place, very tough place.
Yeah, so, we could spend the whole podcast just talking about that. Yeah, I had an interesting conversation. This German entrepreneur who connected with me on LinkedIn, a space-related company.
Yeah,
we got to talking, and then he flew into Washington via California. I took him out to dinner, and we talked 2 hours about World War II and the whole German point of view, and it's very interesting.
Yeah, no, I mean, it is that, South Africa is a gigantic, Africa is a gigantic continent. The mineral wealth, South Africa's about the size of Texas,
Mm-hmm.
but the mineral wealth and the natural resources there are incredible.
Right.
And then I think there's 12 official languages. So, I mean, it's the cradle of civilization, right? The oldest fossil record comes from Africa, from South Africa.
How often do you travel back there? Do you still have family?
Yeah. You know, my grandmother, speaking of entrepreneurship, my grandmother started her last business when she was 90 years old.
Wow.
Delivering food to elderly people. And I would be like, Grandma, who's older than you? like who are you delivering food to? But she passed when she was like 97, I think. Mm-hmm. And we would, because we'd take the kids back and we'd, go see a bunch of the family. But unfortunately, with all the craziness, our family dispersed all over the world. I'm next year, like kind of as a milestone, next summer, I'm going to take a bunch of people from the island. You're welcome to come.
Okay.
We're going to rent a bus and do like a 3-week safari.
Wow.
Because I've done that before for other friends.
Yeah.
And I grew up in the bush. Like the bush was just part of my fabric. And until you actually go into the wild and you smell it and you see it and you hear those sounds and you see those incredible animals and creatures and like immerse yourself in it, I can't even begin to describe how amazing it is. It's really a magical place.
Right.
Really.
Yeah. South Africa is definitely my bucket list.
Well, let's go.
Hiking Kilimanjaro.
Next summer, let's do it.
All right. You're on.
Good.
So you transitioned into UCF. How did that happen?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So my dad, that starting with the gold mines, he ended up doing a lot of work for Ford Motor Company. Speaking of the Germans, he did a lot of work for Mercedes-Benz. We traveled like extensively all throughout Africa, all throughout Europe. But my dad always loved America. That was the goal. And he started working with IBM and their AS400 systems. And so we got to immigrate to Atlanta when I was 15. But I had done several trips to the U.S. before then. And actually, early entrepreneurship stuff was Dad would bring stuff back. So there was a whole thing that I had him doing. I was like, all right, Dad, I want you to take an audio cassette, record the radio. And then I would dub all the audio cassettes and I'd sell the audio cassettes just of American radio to all my friends in South Africa.
Wow.
And then I would take, there was these jelly bangles that would glow in the dark. You could only get them in the United States. So I'd have him buy a whole bunch of those and then resell them to all my friends in South Africa. So I just it's what you did, you
were Amazon before Amazon.
Just entrepreneurship was in his blood, was in my blood. Like we were just constantly doing stuff like that.
Right.
But then 15, moved to Atlanta. I knew by then that I wanted to be a filmmaker, and there was a phenomenal high school based Walton High School in Marietta, Georgia. Was exceptional. Mrs. Brown, to this day, Diana Brown, she had this thing called the Walton Advanced Learning Program, but really it was a video club. And we started making films like right out the bat. And because I had been doing stuff for a long time, I ended up making a film that was a drunk driving video. So it was basically made by all these kids under 18. And it was the story about a kid who goes with his girlfriend, gets completely hammered, and then kills her in the accident. And we took a car that we had done and we put it in the front of the school that was all smashed up.
Right.
Well, it ended up becoming part of the health program. Everybody in Georgia had to watch that film.
Right.
And I was like, oh, I'm onto something, So that ended up, getting into all these film schools and stuff. But I was ahead, and my parents would not allow me to go to L.A. or New York. And then I found this film program. It was pretty funny. I was either going to go to Chicago, and it was incredibly freezing cold. Or that same day that I checked, right in that thing, I went to Orlando, and the professor had left a note on the desk for my interview. And he said, we're filming today. Come down to Universal Studios. So I go down to Universal Studios, and there's all the film crew and everything like that. I walk in, and they're like, I'm here to see Mike Sullivan. He says, okay, your wardrobe's in the back. I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like, oh, well, we're short of women. We're shooting this film about Elvis, and we don't have enough women. So you're going to put on a wig and a dress, and you're going to be an adoring Elvis fan. And I was like, what? So I go to the back. I get dressed up like a girl. The guy next to me is like the super goth film guy. And he looks so uncomfortable in a dress. Later on, I got to make films with this kid. But that was my introduction to film. They had all of this gear. Disney had donated equipment. Universal had opened studios. It had the unfortunate name of like Hollywood East. But I was like, this is fantastic. Like they're just making stuff. And then I went on to make 15 films while I was at UCF. So it was just access to gear and doing. If you take one thing away from my interview, I've always just like making stuff. I make stuff. And I was like, okay, nobody's heard of UCF, but one day they will hear of UCF. And it was that access to equipment that just got me super excited.
Wow.
So yeah, my film career started in a dress.
That's funny.
Not ashamed to say it.
Right. So Blair Witch.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So what was the creative spark behind Blair Witch and your involvement?
Yeah. So like I said, we had there was 20 of us in the first film school at UCF. I was one of the first 20. And we just were helping each other out all the time and recruiting. There was kind of two different groups. One group wanted to make Hollywood movies, and I was in that group. And so everything that I made was big and complicated. And, I raised just over $600,000 in donations to make a film called It's Relative, where I met my wife and so many of my friends. It was a very well produced movie, but I realized, like, wait a second, I'm not a writer because the whole goal was to make a Student Academy Award film. And so I wanted to, because nobody had won a Student Academy Award movie outside of Los Angeles. The other group were like super artsy, making these like, indie films that were like really grainy and gritty. And there's this guy named Ed Sanchez, who's a super tall, 6'7", I think, or 6'6" Cuban guy who had big mutton chops. And, he was just a character, and him and I could not be more opposite.
Right.
But because of the environment, we started working on these things together, and I started realizing, oh, wait a second, this guy, he's got a lot of the things I don't have, and I have a lot of the things he doesn't have. And so we started, like, over the years of film school, we started being like, oh, we should really do stuff together. And then this other guy named Greg, who was actually in the military, he had done, he had come out of his military service. He had been part of military intelligence. So, like, he knew everything about tech. He was a technology and also logistics and all that kind of stuff. And there was this other guy named Mike Manello, who was more on Ed's side, super into independent film, like worked in a movie theater, really understood like that whole thing. So those guys, and then there was this other guy named Dan Myrick. So it was for us five. We all worked on stuff together, talked about film all the time. And Ed and Dan started talking about this idea called the Woods movie. And we talk about it, and they tell a story and the whole thing. Originally, we were going to film on 16 millimeter, and we were going to do the whole thing, but it was impossible to do. Like it just wouldn't. It was too big of an idea. And then we all graduated. We went different ways, and I got my girlfriend pregnant. So I had to, we're still married after many, many years. So I think we're about to celebrate, May 28th, we'll celebrate 32 years. But we all went in different directions and came back. I went to Nickelodeon. I launched Nickelodeon Studios. I launched the Golf Channel. I was involved with the Golf Channel. And a few years afterwards, basically we got back together. Greg had been trying to raise money to do the film with Ed, and they hadn't succeeded. And basically we all came together and said, okay, if we don't make this, we'll never make it. And at the time I'd had some really good success. And I said, look, I'm going to write the first check to do this. And my wife, we basically had a choice. We were going to buy a house or put money into the movie. And she said, I think we should put money into the movie. And so that was the first check that went into Blair Witch was that. And then I started raising money for the movie, and I quit. I had, at that point, I had my first business, and we started working on Blair. It took us 2 years from that point before we sold the movie at Sundance. So it was really like the total journey of Blair was really, from that time in film school to the time that we sold it, it was probably about 4 years of like various different versions of it. Obviously, for me, that point of view experience that I'd, had with my dad was a very important part for me. But then, Greg added, hey, we'll do this real time, 8 days, GPS, give the actors GPS. They won't know, we'll put them in film school. We'll do it really real. And, Ed was just an incredible editor, and Dan was a really strong editor, and Mike had all these things. So it was really the alchemy of the five of us that slowly over those 4 years, various different versions, came kind of bubbled up. And then the biggest single moment for the Blair Witch Project was that we originally had this idea of the experiment and what we did in 8 days, but we were unsure of that decision. And so we made a documentary that the original scope was a documentary within a documentary. So this 8-day experiment and then all this other stuff. We basically came to this point where like all this other stuff takes away from the immersive point of view. And if we lock people into this first person point of view, it's going to be more compelling.
Right.
But we had spent most of our money on all this other stuff. So we didn't know what to do with it. So we kind of had this thing where we said, what if we, like, there's this thing called the internet. Like, what if we start like slowly leaking this stuff out on the internet? And we start, marketing it on the internet. I mean, we didn't even call it marketing. We just wanted to get all our other stuff out.
Right.
And it was that decision that A, made the film much better because, it was very compelling, 87 minutes short. B, it gave all of these other hooks for people to go in. So all of a sudden, all these other websites started, fan websites started coming. This is before Google, right? Google didn't exist, right?
Yeah.
So you had all of these sites that got built, but we were one of the first, I think we were the first independent movie to use content to bring people into that experience. And when we sold the movie at Sundance, we had, lines around the block. We had all of these fans, mainly because they'd come to our website and participated in our website before they'd ever seen the movie. And we had done a lot of things that we never said it was real, but we never said it wasn't real. And we gave them a lot of very, very authentic things so that a huge percentage of the people who went into seeing the movie thought it was real.
Right. Did you ever think that the movie would have such a major impact at the time? Because we're talking like late 90s, right?
So the first investor that I managed to talk into giving money was one of our neighbors. His name was Richard Ungaro. He was an executive at Blockbuster Video. And he wrote one of the first checks to go into the movie. And we had an early screening of the movie for my dad's friends, one of which was Richard Ungaro. And my dad was horrified. Like, he watched the movie and he was like, oh my God, this is so bad. And like, he was so embarrassed about it. And like, he literally got up and made an apology to all of his friends.
Oh my gosh.
And Richard got up and he said, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
He said, this is incredible. I've never seen anything like it. And it's scary, and it's powerful. So no, you don't ever think that I mean, the movie made almost $500 million worldwide. It was the most, profitable. We were in the Guinness Book of Records, until we got taken out by My Big Fat Greek Wedding. But we were, no, we never imagined the success, but we did know right from early on. I mean, right from that decision. I mean, right from the very early day, it was the best idea that I had seen for an indie movie, because it took everything, and this kind of has followed through a lot of things that I've done since. It took all the shortcomings of indie movies and turned them into assets. Right. The fact that it was grainy, the fact that it was shaky, the fact that it seemed real, like taking all of those weaknesses and actually turning them into strengths. That's a very good way, as a creative entrepreneur. It's like constraints are actually a blessing. And I don't think a lot of people think that way. They're like, I don't have enough money. I don't have enough time. I don't have enough resources, whatever. Yeah, it's hard, but use those constraints to help build what you're going to build. You actually find that in the raw materials of what you've got. Right. And that was a huge lesson from Blair.
Because in a sense, it was like a startup. You had a low, limited budget.
We had no budget, but well, yeah.
Was it 60,000 total, or
no? So at the end of the day, at the time, the first check was $30,000. That was instead of buying a house, we put that in there. But then, and that got us the experiment, filming in the woods. But at that time, if you were going to Sundance, which we did, you had to deliver a film print and an optical soundtrack and a blah, blah, blah. So at the end of the day, it was about $180,000. Yeah. So, and then in total, I can't say the exact number, but many millions were returned to the investors. So it was... It was very good for the investors. Right. It was very good for them, and good for us. I mean, I can tell you all kinds of crazy. We'll be here forever if I tell you all the crazy Hollywood stories that catapulted us into. I mean, we got together, put our money together, and bought groceries. We got a house, and collectively we were in a house. Like 2 days before we went to Sundance, a couple of the guys had their power turned off. I had a baby. Wow. At that time. And when we went to Sundance, we were broke filmmakers. I'll tell you one quick story. They said to us, they're like, we love the movie. I mean, it was a bidding war. It's a whole thing. We love the movie, but we're just not sure about the end. And we knew the end was really, but we were so broke, and we were getting all this. They were like, well, we'll pay you money to reshoot the ending. And we were like, how much will you pay us? And so, I think it was something like $90,000. We couldn't believe $90,000. We're like, what? Yeah. And we're like, okay. So then we were like, we just went and paid all our bills off, paid everything off, went back to the same place, and we shot these horrible endings, like really terrible endings. And then we came back and they're like, well, we think the original ending is the right one. We're like, you're absolutely right. Yeah. But that was how he survived. Yeah. Blair was one thing after another of collective thinking, working. The five of us were constantly solving problems together. And then also just not taking no, and not just having being stuck on what we wanted to do. There's so many things that I could tell you out of that film that have informed everything else.
Those are great lessons learned from that experience that you can apply to entrepreneurship and general startups.
Really, the last thing I'll say about Blair, maybe because I know we've got so much to talk about. We were always imagining the best case scenario and being prepared for that. Right. So when we sold a movie, we went to New York to meet. So originally, Artisan, the distributor, was actually a video library. So we knew they had all of these videos. So we wrote like 32 ideas on how we would market the film. And we went to New York and we met with the marketing department. And we went through our list, and of the 32 ideas, they ended up doing like 28 or 29 of them. And to their credit, they really had us involved in it. But we had the material. Like, we walked into there not being like, hey, it's great you bought us our movie. What are you going to do with it? Instead, we were proactively saying, this is how we would want to distribute the film.
Right.
And, so we had the missing flyer, for example. That was, we put up missing posters all across, the United States. And then we had a thing you could tear off the number and call, and we had a live line. So, so we did that. We did a special on the Sci-Fi Channel that, again, took a bunch of the material that we'd shot and told this like crazy story. It was the highest rated special that they had in the Sci-Fi Channel, right? So like, we were always proactively ahead of everybody else, thinking about our perfect way to go. And I think that was, one of the reasons why Blair, and then fortunately we got in a place where they listened to us, and we genuinely, later it wasn't that way. It got a lot harder.
It worked, because I can remember like it was yesterday, a lot of people at the time actually thought it was real.
Yeah.
And no, it's fake. It's a movie. No, it's real, man. So you would have these intense debates. Yeah, because nobody really knew for sure, So good job.
Well, I appreciate it. I appreciate it. And there was so much nuance and detail that went into that tapestry. And then later we got hired to do that we got James Cameron hired us to brainstorm on a TV series that he was doing. So like, we actually started doing a lot of consulting and work once the movie had hit on how to do this kind of in fact, Mike Manello has built a career out of that. We're all still very close. That's also another testimony to everybody is still married to either the girlfriends that they were with or to the same partners. Everybody didn't, lose their mind. It's a good bunch of people in right place, right idea, right time. Lots of outside of the 5 people I just talked about, a lot of incredible. Our attorney, Stuart Rosenthal, was amazing. The agency Endeavor, which ultimately became William Morris Endeavor, was this young, aggressive agency. They were incredible. The distribution. They were young and had full of ideas, and they've gone on to do in various different ways incredible things. So it was just it was the right idea, right place, but also we were very fortunate to meet incredible people. And then able to act on those relationships. And that's another thing that I think goes to entrepreneurship is recognizing what you're good at, recognizing what you're not good at is equally valuable. And then surrounding yourself, the cliche is surround yourself with people who are smarter than you. But it's so true. Like that alchemy of people and the quality of the people around you, making those choices, those are really hard choices to make. We would agonize on, okay, who's going to be our PR guy, and that choice really mattered because the guy that we got still to this day is a very good friend, and the PR on Blair was off the chain, but there were 400 choices that we could have made that would have been the wrong choice.
Right.
So the fact that we made the right choice with Jeremy Walker, and that flows through to every business.
Right.
Yeah.
So taking the success in the film industry that you had, you pivoted into gaming.
Yeah.
Right?
So we made 9 movies and 2 TV series over the 15 years that followed. But pretty early on, we ended up working with this group out of Texas called the Gathering of Developers. God, nothing meek about that name, right? But they were incredibly talented guys out of Austin, Texas, making PC games. And they were really into Blair, but they were also really into kind of the techniques that we had used in the filmmaking side. And so we made these PC games, and they were very dark. And like one of the things was you had a flashlight that you could turn on, and only wherever you put the beam of the flashlight would you see things. And they were terrifying. And I just fell in love with making video games, just really, really awesome. And my years later, my sister, had twins, and she was walking the twins on this path, and this lady fell in love with the twins, and they would walk together, and she'd take care of the kids, and whatever, they became friends, and they would talk back and forth. And one day she said to my sister, "Hey, like, wasn't your brother involved in like Blair Witch and movies?" And yeah. She said, "Well, my husband is looking for like a cinematic producer that might have a game background. Do you like?" And you said, "Well, actually, he's really into games." Blah blah blah. Long story short, I go and meet her husband, and he was the general manager of EA Sports, and they were looking, the Madden franchise every year has to like outgun itself.
Right.
It's an incredibly, I think they're at 35 years now or something like that. It's an incredible franchise with such a rich history. But every year you've got to do something different. And his name is Roy Harvey. Roy definitely had this vision for doing something unexpected. And at the time, the first Last of Us game had come out. You may not know this game, but now it's
very popular.
Yeah, and it's now a TV series. So the first narrative game, Last of Us, was so innovative in that you played it, but it was deeply rich narrative.
Right.
So Roy's vision, and then the director that I worked with, Mike Young, their vision was to completely turn Madden on its head, because everybody was talking about being on the sticks, and that's great, rich gameplay, but football has such a legacy, such a deep narrative behind it. So we came up with this idea. Mike came up with it, and then I helped him write the script. For a guy who was serving, his dad was his high school coach. His dad, they won the high school championship. His dad was killed in a car accident. And then he basically escaped to the military and went to Iraq. And now he comes back, and this is the beginning of the story, where him and his best friend, who's a wide receiver, are long shots. So it's called Madden Long Shot. And you then had to play from a complete outsider long shot and get yourself to the Super Bowl.
Wow.
And the big thing that we did that was very different was you could lose. There were so many failure states. Like, the best way was you and your best friend make it to the Super Bowl, and it's amazing, right? But you could lose so many different ways along there. It was basically kind of like choose your own adventure. And the game guys basically hated it. Like the game team internally, they hated the idea. They just couldn't wrap their head around this narrative vision that Roy and Mike had. And so internally was really, really difficult. But we were determined to do it. And I didn't know any better. I was just like so focused on getting this story out. Ultimately, we made about 6 hours of content that you could play in a 1.5 hour sitting. And we won Sports Game of the Year. It was the most profitable Madden that had come out to that time. But again, it was this, if we'd pitched Blair Witch to somebody, to a studio, there was no way it was ever going to get made. And if it wasn't for Roy and his, he played defensive end he was just blocking for us all the time, right? And then Mike's vision of doing it, and then so we ended up making 3 versions of those games. Each one became more and more profitable. It was a big reinvigoration of the franchise, and so much fun. Actually, some of our team went on to work on Last of Us 2, which is really, really cool. Again, just kind of going against the odds, just trying to do something different. Skate to where the puck is going is like a big thing in my life. It's like you can see kind of where it's going, but that area is a gray area. That's where I love to play. That's the best thing for entrepreneurs to play. It's like, how can I both creatively and then logistically, practically get there? And Madden was that for me. And ultimately, I started work. Roy went on to run a division called the Search for Exceptional Experiences Division, which the D kind of got put in there, but it was basically R&D for EA. And so I started working a lot with the seed guys going, okay, how can we, basically bring the narrative things? So like in FIFA, like how can, the story modes, how can we do that? And how can we share art assets, and logistically, how can we do this? Because the engine that EA had wasn't built for narrative. Right. And so we had to write a lot of original technology to basically force the narrative tools, technical tools that we needed in there. So it was fascinating. And one last thing that I'll say about film versus gaming. So many of the people on a film set are artists and emotional people, and about half of a game team, maybe a third, are the same kind of people. They wear their lives on their sleeve. They make beautiful pictures. They've got emotional IQ, right? They're really emotive. So you typically do like a rah thing, right? Engineers, not so much. In fact, software engineers and engineers in general, they're very practical, very detailed, and So in the beginning of Madden, I got in. I did my normal like rah film thing. And the lead technical guy, still Matt, he came to me. He was, "What is that?" I'm like, "That's it's a rah. It's get the team all." He's like, "Dude, you just made all the engineers furious. You just pissed them all off." I'm like, why? You're like, that's not what they wanted to hear. Right. They wanted to hear, like, okay, this is the burn down rate and here's the technical design approach. And they want to hear all of this stuff. Yeah. And I realized, okay, wait, I'm not speaking. These are different humans, right? Yeah. They think differently. And I had to change everything. So I just said to him, hey, look, I apologize. Teach me, and I had to learn how to talk to engineers and how to think like an engineer and get into all of that type of stuff. It was very, very, very different. And then ultimately, last story, the best thing that I ever did while I was at EA, when you get into this thing called alpha, which is really like all of the engineering's been done. You've done a vertical slice. You've done you've set up all the technical things. You've captured all of the material that are going to go into the game, into the narrative. But now, like, it's all got to be locked down and sewn together. And it is crunch time. Alpha in game world is, legendarily long hours, sometimes 6-7 days a week. So I noticed that a lot of people were working on Saturdays. And so I came up with this idea. I got a cart, and at the end of the Saturday, I loaded it with like drinks and beers. And EA had all of these floors, and I would just walk the floors, being like, "Hey man, you want a beer?" And like give them a beer, and then, "So what are you doing? Tell me what your problems are." And so there's 120 people on our team, right? And that way, in a very social way, I could learn like what their problems were, what their pain was. And that would be my line. I'd be like, "Hey, I'm here to find out what your pain is. So you tell me your pain, enjoy the beer, tell me your pain." And then I could take that and then, go over here. And there's like, "Oh, wait a second. I got this guy over here who could solve that problem." Right. Because the biggest problem with game development is somebody does something that's very, very specific. And we called it throwing it over the cubicle. Be like, "All right, I'm done with my piece." Whoop, throw it over the edge of the cubicle. Right. And the next guy had to catch it. But if you weren't thinking about the person who comes after you, like, things would break. Right. So beer cart, best advice I can give you for game development. Right. Yeah. That silo mentality kills. Yeah, it really does. And especially when you've got specialists, right? The more specialized you become, and devs are amazing people, but because a lot of times what they're doing is just so technically difficult and detailed that they do become siloed and locked away from the other humans, right? Right. Yeah. Well, I can tell you just real quick on the video games. It's exciting that you worked in Madden. I'm a big fan. I played Madden for many years. That's so awesome. But to see the future of gaming
evolve into what you see today with Call of Duty and Red Dead Redemption and
absolutely. Yeah. I mean, Red Dead, man, like that game is just to talk about open world. I mean, I just love that game. Yeah, no. And look, we do a lot of work with Unreal Engine, which of course is right up the road, Raleigh, Durham. Yeah. And I highly recommend, Lex Friedman has a podcast and Tim Sweeney just did just over 4 hours. So Tim Sweeney's the head of Unreal. Yeah. And he talks a lot. If you only listen to one podcast on gaming, it would be that one. Just came out, I think, last week.
Yeah, I'll check that out.
It's very, very good. But yeah, the future of gaming is phenomenal and very, very interesting. And talk about, the AI playing such an important role in it. I mean, in the early days that I was involved in EA, we were talking about what AI could do. And then just now, like the tool set in computer graphics alone have gone through this unbelievable evolution over the last 2 years.
Right.
But yeah, gaming is very interesting to where it's going. And that Tim Sweeney podcast is a good one.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So a very interesting and exciting background.
Yeah.
Which kind of culminated into this idea for Skillmaker. So I'd love to hear the story of how you...
Yeah.
What was the idea behind Skillmaker?
Well, so I owe my father a lot. So my dad's had 50 years in learning and development, and, fathers, sons, like I always loved my dad. We were always close, but I was on my own thing. I was doing entertainment, movies, games. If you told me that I'd end up like working with my dad at all, I would have said, no way, just not going to happen. Right. I mean, I love my dad, but no. COVID. And then dad was kind of in trouble a little bit. He and this other gentleman had started a company called Promising People. And the idea was, it was part of my dad's very religious, so part of his ministry was helping people who are in prison. And so recidivism in this country is insane. The number of people who go back to prison is just astronomical. So their idea was, what if we could use virtual reality to actually train people while they're in prison, and then they won't go back to prison? And Promising People still exists. It's it's a good company, and they chose electricians as the first job to train for. And the downside is they're not very technical people. So dad called me during COVID and was like, I'm in trouble. It's like, we can't solve how to do this. And, could you get involved in helping us actually rebuild the technology? So we did. We went in there, built a team. And that was when I was driving around the country. I would, basically everybody was remote. We could do it. So ultimately we were able to take the training just using virtual reality for an electrician from 8 months down to 15 days. And that was really cool. And I finally read my dad's books. My dad had written like 4 books. And I was like, Pops, like there's some really good stuff in here. I think we're doing the wrong thing at Promising People. Not that the mission of the company is good or everything like that, but I think there's a lot of work here that really needs to happen. Yes, virtual reality, but there's a lot of other technology that we can use, especially AI, that could, on the technical side, solve the problem. But I also think that, it's really difficult to run a business in the justice-involved system. I was convinced that enterprise is where we needed to be. And also we needed to find this like dream client who had a very big technical problem that needed to be solved at scale. And then we could solve that as kind of a master story. And ultimately, a friend of mine, knew the head of marketing for Genuine Parts Corporation, GPC. GPC owns Napa Auto Parts. And so my friend introduced me to the marketing person who was running it, and she said, oh, you've got to meet John Ellsworth. So John Ellsworth at the time was the head of training. And very, very fortunately for us, John ended up getting promoted to the GPC level, reporting directly to the chief information officer.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden, we had this client that had this gigantic problem that needed to be solved. And it was mapping so much into my vision of like where we needed to go.
Mm-hmm.
And so I really started Skillmaker to do, the previous thing was really my dad's vision. My dad's kind of retired now.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was me learning from him, but then taking my 30 years of content development and applying that to actually making this better.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I can go into the problem, solution, all that if you want, but that was the origin of Skillmaker.
Right. How do you measure success?
Yeah. So the problem is by 2030, we're going to be short 85 million skilled workers.
Mm-hmm.
People use their hands, they use their body, use their brain to solve problems.
Yeah.
Yes, trades, but the problem for Napa is they're skilled technicians. It's very specifically. So when we first started working with Napa, they were asking about technology and VR, and I said, no, like, don't worry about the technology.
Mm-hmm.
Let me understand what your problem is first. Let's really dive into that.
Mm-hmm.
And so we went to shops. We went to auto repair shops and we talked to them, and turned out that entry-level technicians, what they call a C-Tech, they do your brake jobs and your wheel alignment and all of that kind of work.
Mm-hmm.
It actually accounts for about 80% of the revenue of a shop, of a repair shop.
Mm-hmm.
But they can't find them because they're normally young people. The workers are aging out, and it takes 2 years to train a C-Tech.
Mm-hmm.
So if we could reduce the amount of time that it takes to train a C-Tech from 2 years down to what we ultimately did, 25 days,
mm-hmm.
you could ramp up younger people and also use all of this technology that they would be really excited about,
mm-hmm.
And get them to work faster. And so this process of reducing training time from 2 years to 25 days,
mm-hmm.
that speed up, was really kind of one of the tent poles of what we were going to do. And then the other thing was, it was so funny when we were at Napa Now, which is like 14,000 people, where we launched it's called the Napa Accelerator.
In Vegas a couple weeks ago.
In Vegas a couple of weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
This lady, she like stands up with a question. She says, all right, I get all this thing about speed, and I agree. I need to get a car into a bay, up on a lift, down. But let me tell you, if that car, that vehicle comes back to my shop, I'm losing money big time. So you better not be compromising on quality.
Mm-hmm.
And she's absolutely right. Virtual reality can show people what they need to know, and we can test people inside the headset.
Mm-hmm.
We use mixed reality where, which is great. We use VR, but mixed reality allows you to use real tools, because in a technician's world, it's often just like the angle of the instrument or it's the full spatialized context of what you're doing. It's the feeling or the sound, like when something clicks, or even the viscosity of an oil or whatever. It's so much more embodied. So if you're just playing a video game, or if you're just in the digital realm, that's not enough. But with mixed reality, you can actually look through the device, and you can use your real hands and real tools in a real situation. And it was that combination of VR and MR that really made a big difference. But that still was not enough. We've reduced the amount of time, but as a technician, you're going to have a million questions. And if you're creating a whole bunch of questions to bug your B techs and your A techs and your shop owners, you just created a problem. So for that, we started using smart glasses. And we basically took this knowledge around the job, like what's the rich knowledge that you need to do that job? And then think of it as like Chat GPT for technicians.
Mm-hmm.
We've now enabled technicians wearing regular glasses, which, by the way, they've got to wear when they're working on a vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
You can ask it a question. I'm standing in front of an F-150. It's a 2020 model. I'm working on the engine block. Tell me what the torque specs are for these bolts.
Mm-hmm.
And instantly you can get the answer to that question in your glasses.
Mm-hmm.
So we got ahead of the curve, again, based on everything that I said. We anticipated that problem,
mm-hmm.
and we've answered it with the smart glasses. And those smart glasses, when you start to get into that, are the measurement that you're talking about, because
mm-hmm.
we test people in the VR setting. We test them. We call it Teach 5, Test 5.
Mm-hmm.
We test them there, but you get incredible data points from this technology. You know, those glasses are time-stamped.
Mm-hmm.
You know what they looked at, what questions they looked at. So as a shop owner, all of a sudden you have very, very rich data, not only of like individual results,
mm-hmm.
but very, very rich data that allows you to go, oh, wait, like this guy's good at that, and this guy's good at that, and maybe I should train him up a little bit here, and I should apply this over here. So you visualize. It's almost like you're able to talk to the shop, right? You're able to see this. It's yes, it's data capture, but it's also really intelligent data on a very specific problem. And I think this is the future that we're heading into now with artificial intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
Natural language processing allows you to have a conversation with data that you were never able to have before, and even put on humanistic qualities to that data
mm-hmm.
that allows people to, it's this, what you're seeing with programming languages. Like programming languages, the new programming language is English or natural speak, right? Because all of a sudden you have this layer that is very, very human.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is one of the things that I'm the most excited about. I know it's one of the things that Napa and GPC is the most excited about. Is it's not just training,
mm-hmm.
it's optimization of those bays.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how you move the needle. So you took, originally Napa was short 66,000 people.
Mm-hmm.
We're helping to reduce that. But more than that, the people that they have, we're optimizing their productivity so that basically the shops make more money.
Mm-hmm.
And if the shops make more money, they're buying more parts. They're buying more parts. Napa's succeeding.
Mm-hmm.
So it all fits together.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it all comes from starting with what's the human problem
mm-hmm.
and then applying technology to that.
Right. So not only you're increasing productivity with training,
yes,
but it sounds like you're also automating a lot of the operations, or at least
so you're
improving them.
You're taking friction. Like all entrepreneurship, in my opinion, starts with this pain,
mm-hmm.
and then applying a creative solution to that pain,
mm-hmm.
right? And normally it's not head on, right? Like normally it's, a lot of times, and the Napa has, I think it's almost like 50 people that they have travel all over the country. They go to like a Holiday Inn and they'll have a classroom, and, as many people as possible will come at night or on the weekends to come like gather around and do that. That analog approach, as heartfelt as it is, as genuine as it is, and as talented as all their technicians are, it doesn't scale. It's just not practical to scale it.
Mm-hmm.
So with VR and MR, you can do it anywhere at any time. You can remote into those headsets. You can have those same technicians, instead of having to travel, can literally remote into that headset
mm-hmm.
and give advice. So it was just taking a different approach
mm-hmm.
to it.
Mm-hmm.
And entrepreneurship is based on truly understanding a problem, getting into the details of it, and then coming up with a creative solution. So yeah, we are automating a lot of things. A lot of it is integration. A lot of it's existing technology that's already there that we're just basically taking the friction away. So can I get those torque specs another way? Sure. I can stop what I'm doing, go clean my hands, log onto a terminal, bring up the account, type in the question, get the torque specs back, and then go back to what I was doing. But if I can put that answer in the glasses in less than 4 seconds, I just took a whole bunch of meaningless work.
Right.
Like, and so you take that idea and you start applying it to everything that goes. I mean, cars are cool now. They really are. They are so interesting. Yeah. Like the kind of, I mean, I was just in Silicon Valley, and I just did the Waymo experience.
Oh, right.
I don't know Google. If you've done that. Yeah, the Google. So I took a Waymo trip, and it's basically the most sophisticated AI, the most sophisticated engineering and computer technology on wheels, right? And so cars, this is a great time to get involved in vehicles and where they're going, because it is not like the greasy mechanic job at all. Like that is not what we're talking about. So if you're going to try and get if you're going to get young people excited about cars, you've got to reach them in a way that they know. And at the end of the day, most, Meta spent a lot of money in virtual reality game playing. So a lot of the ways young people know about VR is through gaming. And there's a lot of things that make sense in gaming. So like I call it serious games, right? So we're using gameplay in a serious way. And just young people just take to it like a duck to water, because they know it. They know the mechanics, and they just fly through it, and they find it very interesting.
Right. So as you mentioned, the young population has already had experience, especially Gen Z, folks with the video gaming and the technology.
They were born playing games. They're born with an iPad.
How do you integrate your technology or sell your technology to industries that may not have that experience or fearful of technology? Because I've run into several other company founders who talk about, hey, I've got the greatest thing in the world. I can do analytics. I can do data science. I can give you predictive reporting.
Yeah.
But if the customer is fearful of the technology, and it's not really, I wouldn't call it fearful. It's just they're stuck using what they want. They're comfortable doing the old fashioned way, and they're just hesitant about adopting anything new.
I think the last few years have seen some remarkable changes. And I think what you're speaking to, why do we not have enterprise VR? If enterprise VR is so incredible, why are we not saturated everywhere with enterprise VR? And I do think that the form factor of the glasses, and obviously the success of things like Meta's Ray-Ban smart glasses, which has been an off the charts success. And then Android XR, Google has a new platform that they're launching right now called Android XR, which is basically an evolution of the Android platform that runs in all our mobile phones. And their whole thing is, yes, XR, but smart glasses first with Gemini built into those glasses first place, right? So it's in partnership with Samsung and everything like that. The huge the huge difference is that people are used to wearing eyeglasses, and it's not imposing for you to put a set of eyeglasses. And then the best thing about eyeglasses is you can take them off, right? So when you're in a headset, it is very disorienting. And because of the fully immersive way of VR, it takes a little bit to adjust to that. And I also think that in the beginning, unfortunately, there was, people would have nausea, or the difference between the interocular difference. And I think there was a lot of things in the beginning part of VR that were very difficult. Now, I think Meta and others have done incredible jobs to get that down. But I think the reason why people will adopt this now versus not in the past is A, smart glasses, and B, the power of putting AI in the intelligence that you get from those glasses, that answer my question right now, just in time information, but also help me solve the problem. Like help me do some diagnostics here. I can take a C-Tech and make them operate like a B-Tech if I give them just a little bit of domain specific knowledge with an AI, right? So, the answer to your question is, I'm seeing the older guys who are very set in their ways put on a pair of glasses very quickly and adjust to eyeglasses very quickly. I'm seeing the younger guys not have a problem at all. Like out the box, slap on a Quest 3. Yeah, I've done, I've played games in this, no problem. So, that adoption goes there. I see executives and marketing people and, those types of people, their like aha moment is when you show them the data and show them the results of using that process. They're like, this is incredible, because the data, everything is about data. It's about data and processing. And Napa has probably one of the most incredibly rich data sets. And I just didn't know what to do with it.
Right.
And so working with them and showing them kind of the results of that has been, I've been working with them now for 2 years, and just the dawning, like as the more demos we made, the more work we've done, the more they have started being like, oh wait, like we can do this with this and we can do this with this. So when your client starts telling you what to do with your solution, then you're onto something, right? Like that's the other thing that I think a lot of entrepreneurs forget. It's cliche, but it's just so true. The customer's always right, or, listen to your customer. Like, yes, have a vision for what you want to do, but like going into so right now we started pre-sales for the Napa Accelerator. Why? It only comes out in March, but I am having basically focus groups, interactive groups, and I made them put down money. Like you have to put down money as a pre-sale, but I want qualified input from the buyers to say, yeah, that's great, but this is the part of what you can do that I really want, right? As I finish the feature set, I'm constantly listening to my customer.
Right.
And I'm constantly thinking about, because something that I think is cool, an actual technician spending time in a bay making things work, he may be like, yeah, dude, like I can just pick up this piece of paper over here and it's much easier. Or I can pick up this tool and so it has to have value to your customer. So beyond the technology form, as a technologist, you kind of need to get away from the technology. You need to think of that as almost invisible and really focus on the day-to-day real problems that a tech in a bay actually has. And if you can step out of your own bias, your own shoes, and really understand what they're going through in a daily basis, then you start to actually, make some progress.
Yeah, I have a friend who adopted the Meta glasses with her business, and she seems pretty happy with it. It's
a great form factor.
Yeah, and I'm sure it's going to be improving with integration of AI in the future. So with Skillmaker,
yes, is it
software and hardware, or
we
just
are
software?
We are basically so there's another problem. This is why I know I'm in a good business, because there's lots of problems. So the other problem is, if you're going to make VR or you're going to make content this way, you have two sets of people that are really, really important. One is the learning and development people, the L&D people. These are the people who talk, in our case with Napa, they talk auto repair, right? They know, they can talk all day long about, tell you how to fix a car. Problem is, they don't speak XR development speak.
Right.
And then you have all these fantastic developers who've been making VR, and they can't tell you the first thing about fixing an automobile, right? So in a way, what Skillmaker is a Rosetta Stone. We're a bridge between L&D and XR developers.
Okay.
And we speak automotive speak and we speak developer speak, and we translate the one to the other and back and forth. And traditionally, when you've done development, there's all of this painful, like, getting to understand what they're talking about from an XR. They have to really step out of their comfort zone to learn all this stuff. And it just takes time, and then a lot of manual data entry. Instead, what we're doing is we're using data science and AI to essentially build this multimodal knowledge base around the job. And all the L&D guys need to worry about is like, what is the background information? We'll automate the script for you. We'll draft that script. So the first time the L&D people come in to our platform, they read what looks like a movie script that is a first draft of the training module, and they haven't done anything yet, right? And they just say, oh, you got it 90% right. Here's the 10% that I need to iterate, right? And then we lock that and we turn it into XR speak. So the whole process, then when the XR developer comes in and looks at it, all of a sudden, oh, these are my failure states. These are the actual mechanics that need to go behind this tool. These are all the, so like these are all the questions that, for me, I've been doing this for 30 years now. I know what all the questions are for a developer. So I'm just getting ahead of their pain. And they go, oh, well, 90% of this is right, but this is the 10%. So all of a sudden, I've shrunk the dev process as well. And that is incredibly, incredibly powerful. So yes, the answer to your question is we're essentially like SaaS or AI as a service. We're really a software tool that bridges that, that level. And then the people who are in the weeds are the XR developers and the L&D people. They're using our platform because we're an amplifier for solving the problem.
Right. And do you integrate with Meta glasses or off-the-shelf type hardware?
Yeah. So we've got to be, look, the hardware is changing so fast. The frontier models are changing so fast. The data science is changing so fast. So in a way, we're kind of the core fiber that knits everything together, but we need to be hardware agnostic. Yes, right now we're using the Quest 3 and we're using smart glasses, but Samsung's got a really cool looking set of headsets coming out, and Google's got a whole set of smart glasses coming out. So like, and every day there's a better and better frontier model, right? So you better be building these days with, being completely agnostic. Now you've got to make some decisions, you've got to build your cloud infrastructure. You've got to build, what's the basic information? But fortunately, APIs and SDKs and, everything else, even SaaS is very interoperable. And even in frontier models now, you have a data exchange that's basically very recently, formed. So, so the answer is, don't build what you're doing. You need to be very, very flexible within your architecture, and definitely don't be hardware, set on all the hardware. It's changing too fast for that.
Have you used any AI tools in the development of Skillmaker?
Oh yeah.
If so, which ones do you?
No, it's integrally. I mean, everything. I use, as a company, we use GPT Pro, and I think it's called Team or whatever the tier is. That's where you can basically integrate the whole team into that. But we also use Gemini. Napa themselves have a very big relationship with Google Cloud. So ultimately, the great thing about Gemini is it's natively involved in everything that Google touches, right? So we're using Gemini, we're using all of OpenAI's tools, but I'm also using Claude. So the thing about each one of those models is the frontier models are starting to specialize in certain ways. Right? So Claude for various different coding is just phenomenal. Right. They're just really, really strong.
Yeah. Commenting on Claude, I tell all the companies I work with now is to please adopt that, to start, looking at using for code generation and things of that nature. So it's exciting that you're using that type of deep technology to.
Yeah. I mean, like each one of the frontier companies have different things that they're really strong at. Anthropic is really a great company, and Claude has done a tremendous amount, especially in the code gen space. But they're not alone. I mean, everybody else, all the other frontier models are making great strides. In fact, I would almost say, right now, very, very, very broadly speaking, OpenAI is doing a phenomenal job on the reasoning models. I think O3 is like my best friend. And I spent a lot of time there, but the details of Claude, obviously when anybody thinks about frontier models in AI, they're going to be worried about hallucinations. And so, we use what's called retrieval augmented generation, or RAG. So we always have a ground truth for our data. And so there's a number of companies that are really good at backing RAG. And so, we've got to do that. So, so for tool use or coding, Anthropic's really strong. OpenAI is right up there. But then, of course, because we're using the Llama stack for the Meta stack, Llama 4 is fantastic for fine tuning and everything there. And then Gemini, with what Google is doing, and obviously with DeepMind, and it's multimodal out of the box, which means that for what I'm doing, I'm using audio and video and text and data feeds and everything like that. So being multimodal out of the box is really important. So Gemini is got a big win there in that way. So as far as frontier models are concerned, we're testing in all directions and using in all directions. But the other thing that you cannot ignore is both agentic thinking and agents themselves. So agentic thinking is just, don't think of these frontier models as the do all and be all of everything. Obviously, the easy way to think of it is, when you're using ChatGPT and it's connected to the internet, you're going to get a different quality of results because it's using the tool of accessing the internet. Or if you're doing deep research reports, where it's going in and getting a lot of detail on those deep research reports. Again, I mean, all of them have them, but the GPT Pro is really extraordinary. That is the beginning of agentic thinking, where you've got these large language models that have now been empowered by all kinds of other tools. So, in the case of RAG, a vectorized database that it can call on, and memory is a huge thing now, where it knows who you are and it can keep track of your memory and all of that. So all of this tool thinking leads to agentic thinking, which ultimately leads to agents. And agents are these things that, instead of just giving it a prompt, you can set up a whole series of things that agent can go and do, and then come back and bring things back to you. So, this is the year of the agents for sure. So anyway, what I'm saying, within the world of artificial intelligence, there's this entire stack of frontier models, agentic thinking, tool use, coding tools, and agents themselves that are completely changing the process of creating a startup company. I mean, I can do so much with a small team. So yeah, I personally use AI just about every moment of the day. And we're using, all of the various different tools that are, it's very hard actually to stay on top of it, because it is so dynamic and it changes, so much. And then because we're at the intersection of AI and XR, that's a whole nother stack that is evolving really, really quickly. So yeah, it's a lot. There's a lot going on.
Your comment that you said you're doing so much with so little reminds me of a recent venture capitalist. I think it was Mark Anderson made a
Andreessen.
He said, we're about to see a one-person unicorn. Or because I think about, just one person kind of orchestrating this whole startup mentality, building something with all this, AI and VR tools.
It is a phenomenal time to be an entrepreneur. It is truly, truly. I mean, just from everything that you don't like to do, you have potentially hundreds of thousands of digital workers that can greatly speed up the process. So even in contracts and legal agreements, the way I work, I've got a fantastic attorney, but he now kind of polishes the work that I generate off of I do the business stuff. I work with my AI. I get the legal document, and then he makes the correction. So, he does 20% of the work that he used to do, but it's actually more important because, there's limitations on what the AI can do.
Right.
But now he gets to spend more time on making that perfect. And then you just that's just one position. You take that in every aspect of running a business, and you can see what the multiplier is like.
Right. Speaking of legal services and AI, have you heard of this app called Harvey?
Yeah. Harvey's great.
Yeah.
So, again, that's a lot of Sam Altman. Harvey came out of OpenAI, out of that world. And Harvey is a RAG-based, RAG-based company. Yeah. And it's extraordinary. And Neil Bacci is my attorney. Neil and I have had a lot of discussions about law. And it's probably a good time, going back to Skillmaker. I had this, really, because we're raising a seed round right now. And so I was in Silicon Valley, both meeting with Meta and Google and a bunch of people like that, but also meeting with
investors.
With investors. And the one investor that I had, he got all excited and he was like, this and on fast food, like, you've got this massive amount of people in fast food. It was like, well, yeah, can I train people in fast food? Yeah, I can. Can I reduce it from 5 days of training to a couple of hours of training? Yeah. Is the value stack there like really worth it right now? Eventually, yes, but I think there's a million other ways, or it doesn't have, like when you're talking about technicians or people working in energy or people working in transportation overall, or telecommunications infrastructure. Like a lot of the core, the country as a whole, if you look at it, we're going through this massive change of industrialization again, and all the infrastructure that we've got to put on those jobs that are highly technical, but you're also using your body and your hands to do that. I mean, when you're splicing fiber, or if you're building a big data center, these are very technical, difficult jobs.
Right.
And if you can reduce the amount of time that it takes from like 2 years to 25 days that we're doing, if you can do that, that has massive value. So fast food, maybe not so much, right? But on the other side of it, everybody asks about healthcare. And the thing is that the human body is so many orders of magnitude more complicated than a car, right? And so, to use a game analogy, the ultimate way was you play a side crawler, right, where you'd have this game move across, and there's only a limited number of, it's on the rails, right? There's only a limited number of choices of what you do. Versus an open world game where you can do anything in that open world, and there's multiple ways to win, and there's all kinds of win states. Healthcare is kind of like that. Like, yes, there's some jobs in healthcare which radiology experts or whatever, there's only a certain limited number of things that you have to know. When you get to the order of like an advanced nurse or a surgeon or a doctor, then really there's so many different choices. So I think the application of XR and AI to healthcare is going to be some of it will be relevant, but some of it will be slower. And always with a startup, you have to narrow your focus and you need to concentrate on something. And right now I'm like Mr. Napa, like I'm literally wearing a Napa shirt because my target is launch, March, make something awesome for Napa, bring value to Napa, which brings value to GPC. And then if GPC has value, then I can bring value to transportation. And then transportation, well, there's a lot of electrification in transportation. So it naturally goes over to energy, which naturally goes into telecommunications. So those are kind of the three verticals that I have this vision for. But if you ask me, what are you doing today, Rob? I'm like, I'm thinking about Napa. I'm Napa all the way.
So I know recently you were in Vegas with this auto show with Napa.
Yeah.
How'd that go? And tell me, how are things with Napa?
Yeah, actually, the last 4 weeks have been incredible. So Napa now, 14,000 people. We were part of the auto tech booth, which was kind of right in the center of the floor. I did 3 masterclass workshops with a guy named Jim Przybylski, who's the head of training for Napa. And basically, we did demos of all of our technology in VR, MR, and AR. So we had smart glasses going. We had all the things. We put over 1,000 people through demos, which was really incredible. And each class that I did had like close to 3,000 people in the master classes that I was doing. And then we started pre-sales. So we had about 2,000 shops that attended, and we're closed over 100 shops.
That's great.
Which is amazing.
So these are pre-sales.
So these are all pre-sales. So we've got over 100 shops sold out, and then, so it was a huge success. For Napa, it was a huge success. It's a 100-year-old company. So this was their celebration of 100 years. And so a large part of the message was, this is where we've been, but this is where we're going. And so the this is where we're going was our show, so that was our part of the message. So Napa was great, but then we went to ASE. So there is a gold standard. If you are a technician, a repair technician, if you have an ASE certification, not only do you get paid like 40% more, but just historically, like retention of that technician, quality of the output, like just by every standards, if you have an ASE certification, it's outstanding. Challenge is, currently, you have to have 2 years of on-the-job experience before you can get an ASE certification. Before you can even apply for the test, right? We have now done an exclusive partnership with ASE that if you use the Napa Accelerator, then we will reduce that. Now, we haven't come up with the final thing, but right now we're talking about 2 months of on-the-job experience. So 2 years of on-the-job experience down to 2 months. So again, reducing the amount of time. And we've essentially worked with Napa and the ASC team to make sure that our curriculum, all the details of what we're doing, basically translate the real skills into the test skills, so that really prepares you for ASC testing in the process of doing that. So we went from Napa Now in Vegas to Atlanta, where I was the first speaker up, and there were 90 other versions of Napa. Toyota and Nissan and Ford and like all of those companies. So I was presenting to them, huge success, and it generated lots of conversations with all of those good people. So then went to Santa Barbara. My daughter got married.
Oh, congratulations!
Thank you very much. It was the most amazing, special day. It was nothing prepared me for how beautiful and joyful it was. It was her best day for sure, but definitely like my wife and I had such a good time. So beautiful wedding. And then I went to Palo Alto and spent a week in Palo Alto, meeting with some of these frontier labs, meeting with basically we're raising a seed round now. So, meeting with companies there, but also like talking about where this is going. LlamaCon was there, and there's so much stuff that is breaking right now. So I spent a good week there, and then went to Salt Lake City. So I had a bunch of meetings in Salt Lake City. So it's been quite a run over the last number of weeks.
So where are you on your fundraising?
So we're basically roughly we did a pre-seed round, which we're not sure yet if we're going to cap it at $1 million. We're originally going for 500,000 in the pre-seed, and that's really to cover us going into capture right now.
Right.
But I think we're going to raise the ceiling on that to 2. We're not sure, but we've got a lot of interest. In the meanwhile, we're working on the seed, which will be 3 million. And so we've got a lot of interest on the seed. So we're basically got to make a decision this week on, okay, who's in on the pre-seed, close that off. Great. go into production. On the 19th, we go. So what we've done so far is we've made, there's 56 lessons. We've written them all. We've done all the research for that. We've made one completely end to end. We've done all our demos. I call it a vertical slice. It's the same thing that I did at EA. You make one thing that basically, from a content and creative point of view, does everything. And from a technical point of view, proves out everything that you've got to do. And once you've got that, it's almost like having a recipe, because now I've got a scale. So all the learnings that I have, I can now apply to my capture schedule, which starts May 19th. We start our capture schedule again. And so now, between now and when we ship, we've done all the thinking, all the work, all the writing, all the technical stuff. All of that is done. But now we make it. But at the same time, we've got pre-sales going. So we're constantly listening to our clients, and we have, those 100+ shops. We can say, hey, here's a taste. What do you think? Give us feedback. Here's a test. Put you in a headset. What do you think? Hey, let's install this into your shop. What do you think? Right? So that you're constantly adjusting the final product. Again, they do this with gaming all the time. You're constantly testing to make sure that you actually have the traction. So we're in that process right now, right in the middle of it. So got to close off the seed, got to close off the pre-seed, close the seed, and then just ship in March. Yeah.
I may know a few investors that might be interested.
I would love to. Yes, yes, and as they say.
Yeah, you and Cam have been great to work with.
Awesome.
I appreciate all the information, detail, data room, due diligence.
I like the fact that you're tough, because here's the thing: if I, as a CEO, as a founder of a company, can't answer the hard questions, then I, as the founder, am not going to succeed.
Right.
So I know it's hard. I mean, this is my third company. I know that first-time founders get overwhelmed, and it is overwhelming. It's very difficult.
Yeah.
But it's kind of, if you think of a blade, it's forged in fire.
Right.
And so the forging in fire is the important part.
Right.
The fact that you're tough, because I'm hoping that you're going to ask me a question that I haven't thought of yet.
Right.
Because it might be that question that saves the business. So if you have really quality, and there's some people who they don't care enough to ask the hard questions. And you need to, this happens with a team. This happens with incredibly talented people. When I build my people, I hire them because I can't do that.
Right.
Because they can do that better than me. They're in that particular domain, they're smarter than me. And if you build that, and it flows through to the investors too, right? Like the people that we have on board in our team, they are way more experienced than me in certain areas. They have a perspective and then that's how you build smart, right? And I learned that from Blair Witch because I lived it. I saw the power of all those other people outside of the five of us.
Right.
And that goes through that. Also choose your customers. Like a lot of people just like, oh, I'll take whatever customer comes in. No, like that's a big mistake. Napa is such an incredible group of people to work with. And I'm adding value to them, but they're adding value to me.
Oh yeah.
Right. And that human thing flows through all of this.
Right. Yeah. Plus working with your father, I'm sure has made a tremendous impact.
Yeah. Pops is cool. Yeah. I mean, I'm trying. I seriously am trying to get him to retire. Yeah. But
something tells me he probably won't, maybe it's just in the blood.
There's a part of him that just, he right from those gold miners right in the beginning, and he just loves. There's this kid on the electrical stuff, and he was 19 years old, and he came to me and said, "Mr. Cowie, I am now the highest earning person in my family, and I'm 19." Yeah. And he goes, 15 days ago, I was the lowest earning person in my family. Thank you for changing my family's life.
Right. That's awesome.
And I was like, oh my God, like, okay, this is like, movies is fun. Gaming is fun.
Changing lives.
Changing lives, having that kind of impact.
Right. Yeah.
And that's been my dad's thing for 50 years. Right. So finally I'm like, okay, Pops, I get it. It's cool. I couldn't have gotten here if I hadn't gone down my path.
Right.
But now, like, it's really his legacy. It's really his foundational things that I'm getting to do. And in my own way, you know, I am the boss, so I get to override his things. But yeah, it's a total joy just being able to work with him. And we've always been close, but we're now incredibly close.
Yeah, I had a similar experience with my dad.
Really?
Working with him.
Oh, that's so cool.
Early on, and then brought him into my businesses. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. We should talk about that offline. I want to hear it. Because there's the other side of that, which is you're working with your dad. And then this is hard. Family business is really hard.
Yes. Family that's a whole, we could do a whole podcast just on family businesses, pros and cons.
Yes, exactly. And by the way, huge part of the Napa, store owners, family business, you know, like, so this is not, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. So I know you were in California and you just recently attended some conferences, and I'd love to get your take on the future vision and your opinion of AI and VR, and where do you see things over the next 5 to 10 years?
So I highly recommend a book about neuroscience called Rethinking Consciousness. It's by a guy named Michael Graziano, I think, or Craziano, I think that's the way you say it. Everything has changed, and everything is changing incredibly quickly. And if you think of what a chatbot does, take hallucination out of the equation for a second, because A, it's gotten way, way better. And then B, you use RAG techniques or whatever. Let's put the hallucination part to the side, because obviously I fix cars, the car better work. So if I don't have ground truth, that's a problem. But this idea of limitless answers to questions, that's done. Like, moving forward, we're going to have all the knowledge we need at the tip of our tongue. Great. Now, recently, you've got, essentially thinking, right? If answering information is one thing, but now you go to a level of thinking where you're using a tool to, like, think about something in a way that's not your strengths, right? Like, I'm not a lawyer, but with artificial thinking and intelligence that way, I can process things way better. And that goes across the whole stack. But information and cognition is not enough. At the core of all of this is huge amounts of compute, and that's all the infrastructure stuff that we're dealing with. And huge amounts of processing, which we're dealing with, and huge amounts of data, right? The problem from going forward in the future is we've got so much information and so much. I mean, it's really, all of those things are going through a magnitude boost. How do I, as a CEO, how do I possibly get my arms around that kind of data and that kind of information? How do I interact with all of these microprocesses when everything, the fidelity of the information is increasing, the amount of it is increasing? Like, it's overwhelming today. Moving forward in the future, how do I, like, basically have this artificial consciousness of the body? And so I met with this, and I've followed them for a long time. There's a frontier company called Inflection. So Reid Hoffman is a major founder. He was one of the first investors in OpenAI. He was the founder for LinkedIn. He's on the board of Microsoft. And along with Mustafa Suleyman, they formed this company called Inflection. And when they started, they were really concentrating on emotional EQ, because so much, yes, you can give answers, but if I'm not contextually aware of the emotional intelligence around that, you can be way off, right? So when I started, they have a thing called Pi, which is their chatbot that they launched in the beginning. And it was focused on emotional intelligence. And I was a big user. It's almost like having a therapist, like whenever you need it, right? Or a coach, like a coach. I was using Pi as a business coach, as a founder coach. And Pi is great. It's still there. But one of the things, so that the new Mustafa Suleiman ended up going to Microsoft. He runs AI now for I'm pretty sure Reid Hoffman was like, dude, we need you over here in Microsoft. So I'm sure sure that, I mean, I don't know for a fact, but it seems like that. So he brought in this guy, Shaun White, who is just, for me personally, he's a pioneer in XR. You look him up. He's an incredibly intelligent person, but also just like brave and like breaking down all kinds of barriers and all kinds of stuff. But anyway, one of the things that he talked to me about that just completely blew my mind is they had this this river that is incredibly important river that all of these industries and farms and all humans use along the river. And they had, each one of the companies that was around these rivers had installed all kinds of sensors into the water quality of the river. And each one of them had detailed information that was purely centric to that business, whether it was farming and agriculture or whether it was manufacturing or whatever, right? And what the problem was that the river was dying. And everybody on that river was going to be completely impacted by that. And so they had tried to save this river in so many ways, but all the information was so siloed. So they ended up applying artificial intelligence to this river ecosystem. And there was just too much information. But instead of having that information, they started to talk to the river. And they started to have this emotional conversation and this information conversation where literally they gave the river a personality. And they could say, how you doing today? What's the problem on like that river bend or that thing? And they could have a human conversation with all of this data. So I think you're going to be able to talk to your car and go, how you doing today, buddy? Like, how's that left wheel going? You know, like there's going to be a different interface with our machines where it's not real. It is artificial. But that synthetic conversation, it means that machines meet us where we are as humans. And that whole idea of the evolution of natural language processing reaches this point where I don't have to worry about the minutia because basically the machine has got that. But what I'm doing now is that I'm emotionally and in a human sense relating to things that before didn't have a human translator to talk to. And Shaun has done work like this, not only on rivers, but he's done it with whales and like whale communication and like us talking, quote unquote, to the whales. And it sounds all like fruity and crazy, but when you think about it as a founder, I want to be able to talk to my company. And if I can actually take all of this information and then turn it into like a consciousness for the startup of my company, all of a sudden, I not only talk to the people, but I talk to all of the data points that I have, this incredible richness of data, and I can all of a sudden relate to it and emote. Because at the end of the day, as we move forward and whatever, more of these jobs get automated and robots are, not only here, but increasing in their capabilities. Skillmaker's focus or its mission, its vision is to be human first, human-centric first. So how do we get ahead of this and not like throw our hands up and go, oh my God, the robots are coming, they're going to run, everything. No, like embrace our tools, but we are still the humans in charge of our tools. So as we move into this future, how do we get to our tools to literally have a consciousness and talk to us? And we're not there. I mean, the problem I'm talking about is unbelievably complicated. And there's a great part of the book where it says, well, in 1918, I think, that Einstein said that there was no way possible that we would ever be able to get our head around essentially gravity waves. He said, I know gravity waves exist, but there's no way that no machine would ever be invented to prove that gravity waves exist. And 100 years later, almost to the day of when he said that, a machine was made that could actually do that. So you have to understand, like, you have to be, as a founder, as an entrepreneur, you have to have one foot in the clouds and one foot in the ground. And I understand that that's a terrible way to stretch. It's a big stretch, but where we're going is beautiful. As long as we keep the human first, lean into what we are good as is humans, and control the tools, bend the will of the tools so that they serve us. And then collectively, there's so many problems. There's just so many problems. And so I'm very hopeful for my grandchildren and for my kids and for the future. I'm very optimistic about the synthesis of information and artificial intelligence and automation, and where that's going from a human-centric point of view. But you need, in my opinion, companies like Skillmaker. You need, in my opinion, companies like Inflection, who are putting the human first in all of the technology that they're doing.
Yeah, it sounds amazing. I know you've had a phenomenal career. And you're multidimensional. Like, you've got the film industry, you've got the gaming, you've got the storytelling. Yeah. Now you're into AI and virtual reality. I mean, you're an amazing individual.
Appreciate that. You've been too kind.
No, this conversation could go for hours. Well, I'm going to have to bring you back for part 2, maybe 3.
I'm in. I'm totally in.
There's a lot of questions I wasn't able to ask.
Look, we could have done a different podcast. I could tell you all my faults. I tell you what, I will say mistakes are one of the most valuable thing that you can get. You learn so much more from your mistakes.
Oh, yeah, for sure. If there's one skill or mindset that you've learned in your career for entrepreneurs or people looking to start a business for founders, what would that be?
Learning. So I'm a big optimist, obviously. I'm a big I think of energy flow in everything that I do. I think of information as energy and everything like that. The biggest thing that you can learn as an entrepreneur is that a barrier, a failure, a mistake, a setback, a change is not negative energy. It's positive energy, because it just eliminated a place that you were going and said it helps you, because it goes, oh, you weren't meant to go that way. And whether you apply faith to that concept or whatever, however you get your mind around it, as an entrepreneur, your job is to move forward. And the biggest skill that I have learned in the hard way is to not, you've got to care. I care deeply, deeply, deeply about the people I serve and the business I'm running. But when something goes wrong, and it goes, in an average day, 8 things will go wrong and 2 things will go right. When something goes wrong, channel that energy into the positive side. Channel that energy into a learning or a plus up or a whatever it is, and never, ever, 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 ever surrender. At the same time, be cognizant of, don't be obstinate. Do not have an ego. The moment you think that you know, you don't know, right? The moment that you have this assurity in I'm right no matter what, you've failed, you've lost. You've got to, the biggest thing, and unfortunately on a podcast, I do a lot of talking, but the biggest skill is listening, truly listening. But yeah, it's turning negative things into positive energy.
And what advice would you give to those entrepreneurs entering in today's economy with all the challenges that we're having?
Do it.
Don't wait. Yeah.
Be a maker, be a builder. Even when I started I made that going back to high school. I made that film, the drunk driving film. I made something. My son followed me into filmmaking, and like my biggest advice to him was just like, all right, cool. What are you making? Like, what are you doing? The tools are so cheap now. Like you can make incredible things so easily. Like I do think we are headed into a renaissance of engineering and building and making and doing things. I mean, so excited about like the future of manufacturing in this country, the future of infrastructure in this country, but like you've got to do it. You got to make things.
Right.
So my biggest thing to entrepreneurs is like, get out there. If you're doing something that's routine, if you're doing the same thing, like, and if you're not happy, I get really mad. I get that. That gets me really. You choose happiness. You choose to construct your world. So don't complain. Do something different than what you're claiming. Again, take that negative energy and bolster it. Like turn that negative energy into a plus.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah. Now, I mean, I know you're super busy with Skillmaker and making sure Napa is delivered with all the technology. Are there any other customers in your pipeline that you're looking as far as traction?
Yeah. I mean, we've got a great organization called FedCap that is related to workforce development. We're talking to a lot of people. We've just had first conversations with Ford, and we just had some conversations with Porsche and VW, and one of our current investors is very involved in energy and utilities. So we're having all of these concentrations, but I would make a mistake if I'm not like hyper focused on, launching Napa. The majority of my day, I'm just thinking about Napa.
Understand.
But it's natural that, like, for example, I'm just moving some of my thoughts and some of my meetings into like, okay, how do we take what we're building for Napa, for example? The Department of Defense has lots of vehicles that need to be fixed, right? So everything that I'm building right now for Napa, that will automatically fit the needs of the Department of Defense, right? Same thing for like Ford. Like there's a lot of, you can take the same thing that I built, just flip it a little bit and serve a lot of other people.
Right.
So I'm kind of trying to naturally go, okay, well, what I got is really, really valuable if I just turn it a little bit and turn a little bit and turn a little bit. So that's kind of where my thinking's going, just as far as like go to market, growing the business, grounded stuff.
When you're ready to talk to some DoD folks, let me know.
I'm going to DC next week, so we should talk about that now. We should talk about that after this interview.
Off interview.
Yeah, exactly. Off the air.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much. I know this is running up on our time, but like I said, there's so many questions.
Yeah.
I could have gone down the road, but it's wonderful just to have an open dialogue with someone like you who's so creative and so talented in multi areas.
Oh man!
But would love to.
I'm sliding him the couple $100 on across the table right
now. I'd love to bring you back.
Yeah, no, I'd love to be back. I get a question all the time about filmmaking because, what started for me was storytelling.
Right.
And storytelling is very, very important to my life. And we are going to actually make a really cool Napa film because the Napa story is the most American story you will ever see. Like normally it's a dad and his sons and, kids, whatever, working in the shop, and like mom's running the shop. She's the first person that people see and the last people that people see, and she's counting the money. That's a typical setup of a Napa shop.
Right.
And it's as American as anything because it's grounded and it's real and it's beautiful.
Right.
So I want to make a film about their story. And then, storytelling and filmmaking and game making and all of that is always going to be a part of what I do. It's evolved now to this immersive, interactive thing where we take pain away from people and help people to improve. So, who knows what's going to happen next?
Yeah, that sounds awesome. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Take care.
Amplified CEO is produced by Topsail Insider edited by Jim Mendes-Pouget, and sponsored by Cape Fear Ventures. For more information about Amplified CEO, Richard Stroupe, or Cape Fear Ventures, please contact Christa at 910-800-0111 or Christa at topsailinsider.com.